Okay. Hello. Morning. So the last time that we did this, we stopped with spawning animals with random X coordinate, right? Using random range. Uh, we also have our player shooting food projectiles at the animals, right? In this case, it's a fish. But we don't have like any collision detections yet, right? So what we want to do for this lecture is we want to create collision detection for the projectile and the animals, as well as clean up some parts of our code that are a bit messy. Um, okay. So yeah, I'll pause this right now. Since we don't really need the animals in our scene view, we could just click on this and just remove it from the scene. For animal spawner, I'll just so for our animal spawner, we still have a sprite for our animal spawner, but since we don't have any use for it anymore, we could just remove this sprite as well. But we know that our animal spawner is somewhere around here. Okay. Okay. So the first thing we should do for collision detection is, of course, to add the colliders. To edit directly the prefab, now we could go to custom prefabs or directory for our custom prefabs, and we could click on the prefabs itself. We could double click on it, and then it will show on the scene view. Okay. So this is currently right now. This is perspective view. We could also use or isometric orientation. This is for in the case that you want medyo flat. It looks flat on the screen. Because the next thing we'll do here is to add colliders for our animals. So in this case, it's just easy. We'll simplify this for now as box colliders lang, and then we'll customize the box colliders. We'll get into mesh colliders maybe soon, or in the future lectures. But for now, let's keep it simple with a box collider. So if we search collider here with add component, you could see a lot of colliders. There's capsule collider, box collider, etc. There is a distinction between your box collider and your box collider 2D. Now, if we are using our 2D na engine or our 2D na game mode, then we select box collider 2D. But since we are doing 3D in this case, we select our box collider like so. Okay, so uh, we can't really see it right now, but if we click on this, this is editing the colliders. So let's click on that. And we see it is actually very small right here. Yeah, that's the collider right there. So we could edit that. We could drag on the size for this at the bottom, or we could just simply click on the small dots. Now, if we see this, there's like a small uh, dot here, sa edges. You could use that to sort of extend uh, the colliders. But I want it to be a little. Uh, I want it to be sort of uh, okay. It's not doing okay. I want it to be sort of equal, no equidistant. So I'm manipulating the x size of the bound of our boundary or box collider here. I'll do that the same way. So y, no, for the z as well. For the z, I want it right about there. Maybe that's a good collider na position. And then for our Y, so it's right here under our cow actually. So we could move it as well, like so, around that. And that encapsulates our cow with a box collider. So if we click on this perspective view and we move the camera around, our cow is inside this sort of box na collider. You're done with the collider. You could just click on the edit bounding volume, and that is the collider. That is set for our cow already. every cow that we spawn, since this is a prefab, will have the collider as well. Let's do that for the dog and the moose as well. So for the dog, double click on dog, add component, box collider. Okay, now it's kind of big right here. We could just shrink it. No? Let's use this, then isometric. So around that size is good. I think 0.15 is good enough. For our Z, okay, I'll put it around there at the front and then a little bit there at the back. Let's go to our X here and then just set the colliders as well. Like so, like so, like that. Okay. Clicking on perspective and moving our camera around, you can see that that is our collider for our dog prefab. So click on edit, and then we'll go to moose, same thing, add collider, edit the colliders. Around there, let's zero this, and it looks, let's do it 0.2 for this. Okay, and then for our Z, can shrink it as well. Okay. Then for our Y, there. So my collider, we do have colliders for every animal now. The next thing we'll do is we'll add collider for our fish object as well, no? This is our projectile, fish projectile. It looks like this. So let's add, sige, box collider na lang din. Just to be, ano, just to be a little convenient. I will extend the colliders a bit, like so. Okay. So let's check. Okay. So that's set, no? Colliders for all our objects that needs collider. Do we need a collider for a player? This time, not really, because the goal kind of for the game or the prototype game is just for us to shoot at the animals so that they disappear. So they don't get behind our player. No, the sense is the stampeding animal should not pass through the boundary which is like behind our player. So we don't really need the collider for our player. But if you want to have that as another game mechanic, then you could do so as well. And then the next thing we should decide is, should this be a trigger or should this be a collider? So collider, again, as discussed previously, when two objects collide, no, if the colliders are both colliders, then it won't pass through each other as long as there's a rigid body, right? If they are trigger, then trigger is just like a field, right? If you enter the trigger, then the trigger will be, the function on trigger enter will be triggered. There is also a thing called on trigger leave or on trigger enter. But for this case, I guess we only are concerned with on trigger enter. So we could click on cow or all of our prefabs and just click on trigger. We can also do it as collider, but I think easier on trigger for now. So we could click on here, trigger, trigger. Fish is also a trigger. One other important thing is we need one of the elements to have a rigid body. If there is no rigid body, then even if there is a trigger enter or a collision, it won't be detected. So we need one of the objects to have a rigid body. We can put rigid body in all of them, no? But in this case, we could just put it on the fish and that would just be the same thing. So I will add a component, rigid body. Okay. And then since we don't really use gravity in this game now, because it's just a side scrolling, no real physics yet, we could just click on use gravity. So it won't be affected by gravity. Because if we have gravity in this case, let's go back to our scene. Okay, let's go back to our scene here. If I click on play and gravity is enabled for a fish, no. Okay, let's look at what happens if there is gravity. So what happens is the fish sort of sinks to the ground because we don't have a ground collider as well, no? Our fish just sinks to the ground. But if we tick off use gravity, then if we click, the fish just goes directly, not affected by gravity, like so. So we don't want gravity in this case. So we just tick off use gravity. Okay. Next thing we do is to code what happens when there is a collision. Since our scripts here on our animals is just time destruction and move forward, we can create another script now, another script, another behavior. But this is solely for collision detection. So we could create a script, C# animal script, and we could say animal collision. Collision. So, okay, let's edit this. For this case, we don't really need start and update. We just want to detect a collision. So we could remove this, and then we could say on. Since we're using a trigger, we should say void on trigger, enter, and this will have a parameter collision. Let me check my notes, because the intelligence is not yet kicking in. Collision other, no? Collision. Wait, no. There. Collision. Other. So other here is just the other object that is part of the collision. On trigger and is news on trigger. Hmm. Uh, right. Anyway, here, when there is a collision, what we want to do is just destroy the object. So we could just say destroy, and then game object, as well as destroy the other part of the collision, which is other, and then we could say dot game object. There is an error. Private member animal collision object enter is unused. On trigger. Oops. Let's see. On trigger. I think I have a wrong spelling. Collider on trigger enter. How? Oh, maybe there's just a wrong spelling on that part. But this one is set now. So this just says that if there is a collision, or an enter trigger, a rigid body enters a trigger, and then we could say that destroy game object. So we just destroy whatever game object this is attached on, as well as we destroy the game object that collided with our trigger. We could also say put something like a debug message here if you want to have like a debug message that, oh, there is a collision detected. But for now, let's just leave it as is. And let's go back to Unity. For this, we go to our custom prefabs. Custom prefabs. So we have our cow. Let's just add the script. what was it? Animal collision. Here we also do animal collision. Animal collision. There. So since all of our things have collision, that's good enough. Do we need the script for our for our fish? We don't really need collision detection for our fish now, since it will be destroyed when it collides with our animals anyway. So okay, so if I play this, okay, I'm not hitting thing. Okay, so we see the moose disappear, the cow disappears, etc. I think my animals are moving way too fast. We can adjust that as well. There. So they are getting destroyed. The animals are getting destroyed when they are hit with a fish. Okay. Yeah. So right now, pretty much our game is sort of done now, or complete now, or our prototype is sort of complete. But we can do a little bit of adjusting, a little bit of cleanup with our code base as well. We could also do a bit of a little more things on our camera, because our camera right now is on perspective mode, so it's a little 3D. No, it looks a little 3D. But we could do it na medyo 2D ang dating of our game. We could change the projection from perspective to orthographic, and it looks like a 2D na siya na game. But then we have to reposition everything from our camera after that, if we want to do that. But for now, I'll just do perspective, because that's good enough for me. No, there's like additional details for perspective mode, so I'll stay on perspective mode. But for you guys, if you want to do it as um, orthographic, then we could go ahead. Anyway, sige. Let's clean up our code or our codes. First one, let's go to our player, no, not player movement. Let's go to time destruction. So for time destruction, the approach that I did, or the approach that I presented earlier or last week, right, was we have a variable for time elapsed, and then we check if the time elapsed is equal to the time, or the time to live, then we just destroy the game object. But we could actually further refine this by having the invoke method. The invoke method invokes a method, diba? Because the method call is otherwise known as method invocation. So this just states that we will invoke a message, and then there is a time frame when that will be invoked. For this, we will put it not in update, but rather in our start na method. So void start. Void start here, or start method, is called whenever our game object is created or instantiated. So here we say invoke, and then there are two parameters for invoke. The first is the method name, and the second one is our duration, or when do we want to call it. So we could say time to live here, no? Or just let's say invoke time for now. We will change that later. So we need a method call, or a method definition that will be invoked later on when the time comes. So for this, we could create a method, private method, or void ang return type, and let's just say destroy this object like this. You could do another name besides this is just an identifier. No, what this does is just destroy our object, and then we could remove this from our update. I'll just comment it out. And then here our method name is destroy this object, so we pass this here as a string. as a string siya, and that should be, the method should also be part of the script, no? Destroy this object or part of the class. And then we will destroy this object when its time to live is up. So after 1 second, we will call or we will invoke destroy this object, which will just destroy this object. So we don't have to calculate for the time elapsed here. It's update. We can also just comment this out time elapsed here. Okay. Sige. Let's look at our play mode if it does something uh, we don't want. So essentially, this should still be the same behavior, no? Our projectile would still die after 1 second. So if I click, there is there it. Let's look at the scene mode. If I click, it still dies after 1 second. So that is our aim here, no? For animals, it's the same thing. They die after their time to live is up. Okay. So nothing really happened that's different, but that's our goal. No, we don't. We're just cleaning up our code. So here you can delete this, or I'll just leave it commented out for now. We could also do that for our animal spawner. So animal spawner, our animal spawner, we are also invoking, or we are also sort of calculating time elapse. Now, if time elapse is greater than spawn interval, then we instantiate. But instead, we could just create another method here, private void, let's say spawn animal. Okay, and then we could just copy our code here. This, uh, this code, oops, here from the random index. So whatever is inside the if statement, we could just transfer it to spawn animal. So medyo mas compartmentalized na siya, no? Here, and then we could just remove that from update. You could actually just remove update, pero I'll just leave it there in case I do something with update later on para hindi ko na siya pag-type again. And then from start, so we could also do invoke here, no? But since we want to call spawn animal repeatedly with the spawn interval, no? Every 1 second this should be called. We will use a different method. In this case, this is invoke repeating. So for invoke repeating, similar to invoke, my parameters man siya, but this has 3 parameters. The first one is, as usual, our method name in string format, spawn animal like this. And then the second parameter is time. So this is the first time that the method will be invoked. So first invocation, I'll say this happens at 2 seconds after the game starts, right? And then ang repeating niya will be our spawn interval. So this will invoke spawn animal after 2 seconds, no, of our game time, or when we start the game after 2 seconds, this will invoke spawn animal, and then it will invoke spawn animal again every 1 second because our game time or our spawn time or spawn interval is 1 second. Okay. There. So it's still spawning, no? I'm not hitting it. Okay. Medyo laggy ang frame rate. But there. The dogs are too fast. So there. Medyo bare bones prototype game, but we get like sort of basic spawning of enemies or animals in this case. We have spawning of projectiles. So that's game object instantiation. We also have collisions as well as random spawning, etc. So for now, for this unit, we are mostly done. Next meeting, we won't meet as discussed previously, but we will have another machine problem that will implement whatever we implement in this prototype. Okay, any questions? You can add more things in this game. Like you could say have a game over message when the animals cross a certain point. So you could do that as a code, or you could also do that like another trigger. No, you could say have an empty game object. You could add like a create empty here and then move it far back. Uh, so we move it far back and then create sort of a so could do this as and post like so. Then you could add a trigger, collider, box collider like this, edit the collider, uh, edit the collider like big X collider here, Y there, like so, that when an animal triggers the collider, when an animal triggers the collider, you could say na game over like that. So you could do something like that. Could also do something like um different collisions, different output, no? We could say, we could do that with tags. So for collision, we have tags here. Say sa cow, we have tags here, right? This one is currently untagged, but we can add tags here. Say this is animal. Okay. So whenever there is a collision, this will be uh, So our cow will have a tag of animal like so. We could also do that for fish. No, there is another tag here. For example, fish save like that. So depende na sa inyo if what you want as a and you can search on like collision, more on collision, no, if you want, and tagging. Ah, any questions? Questions so far? If there are no questions, we can dismiss. So short lecture lang. And then Thursday, we will have a machine problem. Deadline for that would be Monday next week as well. Monday next week, we have class, right?